Some moments never fully leave you, like the feeling of being under threat. For me, one of them was the summer of 2006. The sound of war between Hezbollah and Israel wasn't just on my screen. It was outside, and I was covering. And like many in this region, I learned early what it means to hold many truths at once. I'm Joe Khawli, a Lebanese-American journalist who follows global affairs closely. I sit down with a former Mossad officer. That's not a contradiction. It's what it means to follow facts, not flags, to ask questions without handing out absolution, to understand power, not just react to it. Some would call that complicated, but for me, it's the job. Sit with the people whose decisions shape lives and ask the questions that don't fit neatly on one side. This is The Diplomat. My guest today is Howlata, Israel's former national security advisor, the architect of the quiet deals that reshaped the region, and the official who stood on stage in Bahrain and warned if Iran goes nuclear, Israel will act even alone. He says things that are hard to hear and harder to ignore. We talk about the rift between Israel and American strategy on Iran, what really happened in the Lebanon maritime deal and why he was called a traitor, the unspoken story behind Israel's diplomacy with Turkey, the Gulf, and even Ukraine, and the phrase he repeated in every major speech: "This is our neighborhood." This isn't about policy, it's about the pressure that builds when security, trust, and survival all sit on one line. This is The Diplomat, inside the room where power speaks. Let's start with the very first major international speech in Bahrain, Manama specifically. You didn't hedge. You called Iran the most destabilizing force in the region, and you said Israel would act alone if needed. Why was it important to be that blunt that early in your tenure?
So first, thank you for having me. Very happy to be here and very happy to be supporting MBN. I think the work you're doing is important in the region. We need to deliver a voice of reason and pragmatism across the Middle East, and I think you're doing this very well. So indeed, the Manama dialogue was my first. I think it was my first public speech as a national security advisor.
Yes, it was.
Not only in English, I mean, also in Israel. I kept away from media. I didn't think that as national security advisor, my role was to give public speeches. My role was to do and to advise and then to represent the Prime Minister Naftali Bennett at the time. But the Manama dialogue was significant because first, I was the first Israeli to attend it in person. Before me, there was a recorded message given by a previous Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Gabi Ashkenazi, but I was the first to be there in person, and I appreciated it because this was for me maybe the most important symbol of how the Abraham Accords are going to change the region, what integration would look like, what uh, uh, this word that has so many meanings and normalization actually could mean in the region. I was very happy to come there and to speak as a member of the neighborhood. I think the most important message I came to be there was that we're indeed neighbors. I remember finishing that speech by saying, "This is our neighborhood. This is where we live, and we need to work together." What was important for me is to single out the fact that there were joint threats to all of us. Iran indeed is destabilizing. It was in Bahrain. Bahrain has suffered destabilizing efforts from Iran, maybe more than most of the regions or the countries in the GCC. I was there just 2 months before Houthis fired ballistic and cruise missiles at Abu Dhabi and Dubai, just a few months later in January of 22. It was clear what Iran was doing. It was very clear that maybe the countries were hedging and it was difficult for them to say. But this is our role. And it was important for me to be there and to tell everyone, we're in this neighbor, we're in this together. Israel can do things that you may not be able to do. And we're not afraid to say what we feel. We're not afraid to act if necessary. Because if Iran does indeed go nuclear, this is existential not only to Israel. This is existential for GCC. This is existential for the Middle East. And we must prevent that. And I think it was a very important message. I got very supportive maybe behind the scenes and maybe not in front of the cameras, and maybe some of them were shy of it, but I got very supportive
When you say shy
remarks on
of
that.
it, what do you think was the difference language between Israel and US on that specific topic on Iran?
So I shared the stage with Mr. Brett McGurk on that event. Actually, shared the stage with him twice, and the year later was another opportunity. Look, the Americans definitely then in the Biden administration did not deliver messages that used such strong words on Iran.
Are you saying they were weak?
No, I'm not saying they were weak. I'm saying their strategy was to use diplomatic, not only language but also actions. They wanted to go back to the JCPOA.
They were not strong.
Well, they definitely did not appear as a deterrent to Iran, and they definitely did not appear by the countries in the region, which was something I thought should have been significant. They did not appear as an ally that will be there not only to defend but also to deter and prevent Iran from attacking, which unfortunately materialized 2 months later when the Houthis fired Iranian cruise and ballistic missiles at Abu Dhabi, and that caused a lot of tension between Abu Dhabi and the United States. But it was very clear what Israel's role is. I thought the Americans were making a mistake trying to get back to JCPOA. I thought that was not the proper way to deal with Iran. I thought it was way more proper to use the leverage that was there in abundance and to push Iran for more concessions. This was a disagreement, a very heavy disagreement my government had with the Biden administration, and I think we conducted this very professionally.
But you said also we've acted quite a lot in Iran over the past year. What's the risk in admitting something like that out loud when also you were called out by your American counterpart that it was improper?
Well, so first, I think the message there, for me, what was important to convey, or for Israel, what was important to convey, was to tell everyone, we don't just know what we need to do, but we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. And this was a continuation of the messaging that Prime Minister Bennett gave continuously. He spoke about the octopus doctrine of the Iranians, and he spoke continuously that we need to get back at the head of the octopus and not just to fight with the tentacles where they're at. And it's not sufficient just to act against Hezbollah or against Hamas or against the Houthis. And we have no need to go to war with Iran. There's 1,600 kilometers away from Israel. This is not what we're based for. But it doesn't mean that we cannot cause them pain.
You were part of the team during former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's surprise trip to Moscow in 2022. Israel tried to mediate when almost no one else would. What does diplomacy look like when it's secret and risky and may never be recognized?
That trip was a very significant effort, but this was not the beginning of what we were doing, because indeed we worked behind the scenes before that. It was Prime Minister Bennett realized that if we are in a situation where we have the trust of Moscow but also have the trust of Kyiv, then maybe we should do something with it. Of course, we could say this is so far away from us. We have so many things to deal with. There's potential only risks, because chances of success were very slim, and we knew that it was a very good chance that we would not succeed. And I started engagement before the war started. I thought that if there was a way to prevent it, then we better try to do this, because it was clear that once this starts, either this ends really, really quickly and Ukraine loses, or this will be a very, very long and bloody war, which unfortunately was indeed the case.
How did you coordinate between Washington, Moscow, and Kyiv?
Well, I won't get into the specifics of it, but I had personal
little bit.
relationships, yeah, with Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor of the U.S. I would meet regularly, and I would talk even more regularly on a daily basis when it was needed, and there were times that it was needed. And we were very close coordination, and we were in agreement on many, many things. Of course, again, as I said before, we had disagreements, but I think the ability of Israel and the U.S. to understand the situations together and to analyze them was always very, very significant. With Moscow, the first visit we had with Prime Minister Bennett was in the summer of 21, just a few months after he was sworn in as prime minister, and that was important because Israel and Russia's relationship at the time, for sure, was significant. Right, we had the Russians in our backyard in Syria. We were coordinating our military attacks against Iranian activity in Syria and their attempts to help Hezbollah. There was very close confliction with the Russians for many years because there was no other way to do this. And historically, Israel and Russia, of course, we had ups and downs in our relationship, but now we wanted one of the really deep lows. Unfortunately, because of Russian decision to lean into Iran and support them on so many of the things that Iran is doing. But back at the time, before the war started, this was a meaningful relationship that we fostered and looking forward to do more. So we had to engage.
You said you were the link in this chain. Um, what do you say to Zelensky while you're also trying to keep deconfliction with Putin, since you used that also word, deconfliction?
So since so many of that was already public, so when Prime Minister Bennett spoke with Zelensky, um, um, the essence of that conversation was to make Zelensky understand that the fact that we have a relationship with the Russians is an advantage in our ability to mediate and not a liability, because we weren't taking the Russian side. We opposed the war. We condemned the Russians at the beginning, we voted with the U.S. and the allies against Russia in the UN. We could be criticized for not delivering military support to Ukraine, and we were. But I'm actually very proud of the way that we conducted our relationship with Ukraine, and that Zelensky will understand that he can trust us. He can trust us in delivering the messages back and forth to Moscow. At the time, there were not many leaders who could do this, or there are definitely not many leaders who would do this. We were able to gain the trust of both Moscow and Kiev, and that was meaningful. It's crucial for this kind of diplomacy. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary.
Let's shift to the quiet breakthroughs. Negev Summit, Israel-Turkey normalization, maritime agreement with Lebanon. These were big, but also subtle. Why did they matter beyond the photo ops?
So let's start with the Negev summit. And to be fair, the Negev summit was led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time, Yair Lapid, who later on replaced Naftali Bennett as Prime Minister. And the coordinator of that was the Director General of the MFA, Mr. Alon Ushpi, is a very close friend of mine. He is a diplomat and a very good one. Maybe you should have him on the show. We can talk about
Please.
that. But in any case, this was an effort that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs worked on. And the significance of that for, I think, Israel and the region was that all of us, Prime Minister's office, Foreign Affairs office, Ministry of Defense, led by Gantz at the time, it was clear to all of us that we have to put content into the Abraham Accords. Abraham Accords cannot stay just agreements that were signed and celebrated at the White House lawn by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu and the foreign ministers of the other countries. The leaders did not come to that ceremony, only the ministers of foreign affairs. And it was clear that we need to put content in that so that this will thrive. This was done by meetings between Prime Minister Bennett and the leaders, Mohammed bin Zayed and the King of Bahrain and Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs Lapid with his counterparts and the defense establishment, Gantz, and of course on my level. But the Negev summit was the first time that they all convened together and in Israel. And the fact that those foreign affairs ministers from Abu Dhabi and Bahrain and Morocco and Jordan and Egypt. Actually, the Jordanians did not come because Ayman Safadi insisted that the Palestinians will be there as well, and this was not a part of that event, so he chose not to come. I think that was very foolish of him not to attend. I think Jordan would have benefited a lot from him coming, but all the rest did come with Secretary of State Blinken, and the fact that they all stood together. It's not just a photo op. It's the ability to discuss and to make sure that everybody understand, the peoples understand, the governments understand their shared interests, and we're willing to work together.
Let's bring the Lebanon maritime deal. You said all our demands were met, and we protected Israel's security interests. Was that statement meant for the world or for Hezbollah?
Well, that statement was first of all meant for the Israelis. Unfortunately, that agreement.
But the Israelis know that you're acting
Well,
on their behalf and
well,
on their security interests. No?
unfortunately, this agreement that was done in the last moment before President of Lebanon finished his tenure, and after that, it would have been, I don't know, years before we could again negotiate or sign this agreement.
We're
Also
talking about
happened.
Michel Aoun,
Yeah,
right?
Michel Aoun, yes. Also happened while we were very close to the Israeli elections as well. And the leader of the opposition at the time, the current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, made this negotiation a centerpiece of his campaign and attacked the government for doing this. I was called a traitor, but by some of the mouthpieces of that chose to divert attention against me. And there was a lot of
But why did he
maybe
call
just
why did he call you a traitor? What was the difference
right.
in his
So
approach to this maritime deal?
So first of all, I think there was no reason to call me a traitor because I don't think I betrayed Israel's interest. I think I worked for it. So I think it was political, unfortunately. And even though I'm not a politician, I was an appointed official and a professional, and I'm proud to be that. I knew that this was a part of the political game that was happening above my head. Their main criticism was that we negotiated under threats and even some offensive measures taken by Hezbollah, and that we continued the negotiations while we were doing this. Where in fact, what we were able to do is prove Hezbollah weak in its own people. Hezbollah got a lot of criticism by the Lebanese for trying to derail the negotiation. The negotiation was important for Lebanon because this was potentially a prospect for them enjoying a gas reservoir, which, by the way, is found to be empty, and Total, the company that came in to try to explore and to develop it, unfortunately said that this reservoir was empty. So actually, the Lebanese did not get what they wanted from that deal. But the prospect or the understanding that this could bring a better future for the Lebanese was supported by the Lebanese people opposing Hezbollah. So there was a lot of criticism on Hezbollah for trying to derail it. The Lebanese government signed a document that has the word Israel. We were named Israel in that document, and they signed it. And as you know, in the region, it's not easy for enemy countries to recognize Israel. They call us the Zionists and the Zionist regime and the Zionist entity, but they never refer to us by a real name. But the Lebanese signed a document saying Israel. There were many good things on the symbolic side of it. For Israel, the priorities of the government or the cabinet were very clear, and we stood the line that the territorial maritime border was for the first time approved by the Lebanese and approved by the Americans. This was a line that we took on our own after we withdrew from Lebanon back in 2000. That was significant. We were able to operate the Gaza reservoir Karish, which started working just before the agreement was signed, and Hezbollah threatened that they will attack that reservoir if they don't have their own reservoir. Well, we signed the agreement. They did not attack our reservoir. Throughout this war, they did not attack the reservoir. So I think this was very significant for Israel's economic needs. And at the end, the concession that we made, not a big one, by the way, on the Israeli portion of the Kana reservoir, right, the reservoir that was in dispute, at the end it's empty. So I think that all in all, Israel did the very good thing while negotiating this and also signing it.
What's or how the language could change during those deals when you're dealing with adversaries? Do you frame it as trying to normalize relationships or just realism?
So I wish we could talk with Lebanon in a language of normalization. I wish. Israel has no conflict with Lebanon. It becomes a conflict with Lebanon because Lebanon, unfortunately, is governed by a terrorist militia called Hezbollah.
Till today?
So I think, after everything that happened in the last quarter of 24 in September and October, the operation that we did, the hitting of Nasrallah and almost all of the leadership of Hezbollah. Clearly, Hezbollah is not as strong as it was. The fact that Joseph Aoun was elected president is a symbol of that, because Hezbollah opposed his appointment as president for many years, and saw him as a rival of their interest. They wanted someone who was more supportive of them, but it happened. So all this does indeed uh, signal that Hezbollah is not as strong as it was before the war and before Israel's operational successes in the end of 24. But we need to make no mistake, Hezbollah is still strong in Lebanon. I'm not sure that the Lebanese armed forces are capable. I don't think they're willing, but even if they were, I don't think they're capable of dismantling Hezbollah, and the need to prevent Hezbollah from becoming strong again is something that unfortunately lies on Israel's responsibility. We started with Syria. The fact that Iran cannot participate in that is very significant.
But do you think Syria was way more easier to dismantle Iran's threshold on it? Yeah, more than Lebanon and more than Hezbollah?
First, I mean, because Syria was in a civil war, and because Assad, as the ruler of Syria, had a lot on his plate. The fact of the matter was that when Israel acted operationally in Syria to prevent Iranian support to Hezbollah, or to diminish Iranian support to Hezbollah, we did not prevent it, unfortunately. A lot of support came in, and we saw the outcome of that during the war when Hezbollah joined Hamas, attacking us with rockets and precision-guided missiles and so many things. But when we acted in Syria, Assad didn't view this as an act of war, because the response was not opening a war in Israel. Of course, he did see this as an act of aggression, and every time he tried to topple our planes, we took out his air defense batteries, and so it wasn't completely benign, but it became a norm. The Russians wouldn't support Assad on this. They definitely didn't support the Iranians of this, and Israel had a relative freedom of action to operate in Syria in this regard. This is not something that can happen with a normal country if Syria was governed properly. And now that Syria is led by Ahmed Ashara, that I do not know how this will turn out with his opinion towards Israel. I'm hopeful, and I want to be hopeful, that he will not decide to make Syria an enemy or adversary of Israel. But for sure, he made a decision to continue his detachment from Iran, and to kick them out, and to work towards that. He's taking risks, but I think it's important for his survivability and ability to rule Syria. This is good. The only thing they need to do is push out Iranian dominance. And if we need to fight, we'll fight. But for the Lebanese future, this is important.
During occupation breaking down, Israel struck PIJ, the Islamist Jihad in Palestinian Islamist Jihad. They had targets in Gaza. You were behind the scenes, and no public statements, no briefing. When do you choose not to speak, and why?
In August of 22, Israel is in election period, and there is clear intel that PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, are about to target Israeli civilians on the roads surrounding Gaza, and we couldn't just wait and see what will happen. We had to act. This is the Israel I know, right? That we have intel, we had good analysis, and there is leadership that is willing to act upon.
Are you
we did.
winking at what happened October?
I'm not winking. I'm just very frustrated and sad that we're not able to do this on October 7th. That the intel was not clear enough. That the engagement between the security establishment and the leadership was not open enough. And eventually, Israel. I mean, this is a complete failure by intelligence and operational. We made every mistake possible on October 7th. But going back to August of 22, the circumstances were different. The intel was clear. And the leadership was available to act, but at the same time, the message or the instruction given by the Prime Minister Yair Lapid at the time was that we want to keep this as short as possible. Israel is in election mode. This is not a time for a full warfare with Gaza, and the decision was to strike leaders of PIJ, the military leaders that were behind this planning of attack, and to try to finish this, and I think was a success. In the circumstances that were back then.
From August 2022 to November 2022, then in Bahrain, you surprised many. you stood on stage and recited Women, Life, Freedom in Farsi, in English, and in Hebrew. That's not typical language for a national security advisor or even a diplomat in that situation, that specific situation. Why did you feel compelled to speak like that so publicly?
Well, we were at the peak of the protests in Iran, and Zan Zandegi Azadi was the slogan. Yes, as you said, women, life, freedom. Um, and I thought it was important to recognize that. I was surprised that I was the only one who actually recognized that. Right? I was surprised that none of the participating in that dialogue could find a way to give support to a protest movement, a peaceful protest movement in Iran, fighting for justified reasons against an oppressive regime that just waited for opportunity when the public opinion left it to go very strongly after their own people. I mean, the protests ended only after the Iranians allegedly used chemical gas in girls' schools to signal to the families that I mean, awful, just awful. So, and I think that supporting the Iranian people is important. We're having this interview. I'm a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. This is something that my colleagues here also do. I think this is very significant. Iran does not deserve this oppressive regime. Of course, it's for the people to decide what to do. But if they go to the streets, the minimum that we can do is to tell them, yes, we support you. You support you in your strive for your rights.
But you're saying that you were surprised not everybody said it before you. But when you said it, did you expect that it would resonate or that it, it would, backfire?
So, I think I kind of knew that it wouldn't backfire, and I can tell you that
It would not.
standing on the stage looking at the audience, they wouldn't clap because I think they understood what will be the significance of them clapping after I said that. Nobody could see their faces except me because I was standing in front of them, and the amount of smiles I got from the audience was significant. And I felt like I was not only speaking on behalf of myself. There was a regional understanding that as long as Iran is led by this revolutionary regime, there can be no peace in the region. There can be no stability in the region, and also for the Iranian people. So I'm actually happy that I had an opportunity to say that. I wish that the support for the Iranian people would have continued, and I wish that there will be a time where this materializes.
You said this isn't about us, it's about freedom.
Right? I did. I did. Because what was important for me to say is, I was speaking, of course, as a national security advisor of Israel, right? This is the role that I had. But this was not about Israel. The protests in Iran are not about Israel. And the oppression that the regime is conducting against its own people is not about Israel. It's about a revolutionary regime sworn to destroy Israel, but they have other things on their agenda, right? They will oppress their opposition inside. They would go after the Sunni countries if they have a chance to. They radicalize the populations and they destabilize Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. If they could do this in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirates, and Oman, of course they will do it just as much. This is about freedom. This is about freedom of the peoples of the region. This is about the freedom of the people to live in a pragmatic Middle East that is governed and led by rulers such as Mohammed bin Zayed and the King of Bahrain that hosted me in that event, that are tolerant, that they believe in dialogue, that they believe in integration, that they understand that the fights and conflicts of the past should remain in the past. This is a joint vocabulary. So yes, I was talking about freedom, and I think that this is what the people of the region would want. They want freedom.
Looking back at your term, is there one sentence or one phrase you remember crafting carefully, knowing it would ripple beyond the room?
Well, I was hoping it would, but there is a sentence I used almost in every speech I gave, in both dialogues in Manama and also in other close sentence. And this is our neighborhood. And I truly believe in that. And I think that it's important to deliver this message. Israel should not strive to dominate the region. Israel definitely should not strive to be in conflict with the region. And I'm very sad that we're not able to end this war and find a pragmatic resolution to live in peace in the region. This is where I belong. This is where my family belong. This is where my kids and grandkids and future generations will belong. And if we're able to understand that and to live like good neighbors in a good neighborhood, then I think the future of all of us will be way better. And I hope that this does not just stay a sentence in a speech, but could materialize as reality.
Thank you for listening to The Diplomat. If this conversation made you pause, it should. That means the words did their job. You can follow the show on any platform. And if this episode gave you a different way to think about politics and diplomacy, share it. Especially with someone who still believes leadership means choosing clarity over comfort. Every week, I sit down with people who stood behind the podium and behind the curtain. They don't deal in theory, they deal in choices with consequences. Because language isn't just how leaders explain what happened, it's how they shape what happens next. This is The Diplomat, inside the room where power speaks. And this is a conversation you won't hear anywhere else.